This miter gauge is new to my shop, and what a difference it makes. It has a preset 22.5 degree recess, and as long as I get that tooth in that right point, it'll be exactly on 22.5 degrees every time. The slow motion here is just to show how I keep my pinky always on the guide fence. That way I always know where my hand is whenever I go to pick up a piece. So as I assemble the pieces, you'll notice I'm not being overly cautious with the amount of glue. It's just more important to cover the entire surface. You'll also see as I put in the final piece that I'm not using any special hose clamps or rubber bands to hold everything together. Note that I'm wearing a respirator because this next step really creates an awful lot of dust. Although I have two dust pickups as part of my dust collection, and in the background you can see a box fan that also has a filter on it. What's behind the camera that you cannot see is I also have a shop filter which circulates the air in the shop. Even with all these, there's still an awful lot of dust generated. This is just gluing up a piece that will become the bottom of the bowl. When working with any form of turning on the lathe, make sure you're wearing all your proper protective equipment, including a face mask. This portion of the piece will be the very bottom of the bowl. I'm just going to flatten a little bit and create a recess for the chuck. This is just creating the mark of where I'm going to have the outside of the recess that's going to hold the chuck. My chuck will go from 2 to 3 inches. I happen to work with 2 3/8 to 2.5 inch in diameter. It always pays to check twice before cutting. This is a skew cutting tool. All I'm going to do is do a back cut on that recess. That creates a slight of an angle, which just helps the chuck hold even better on the bottom of the piece. The foot that I use to glue onto the bottom of the wood piece here that I glued together for the bottom of the bowl is attached to a faceplate. I used carpenter's glue to attach it, and this vibrating tool really helps to remove it. So now what you're looking at will actually be the bottom of the bowl on the inside. So I'm going to take some time to flatten it. It's a lot easier to work with it now to make it flat than when it has the other segment pieces glued onto it. Now I'm just checking to see for flatness and if I've got any major areas of concern, which I see there are a couple, so I'm going to go back, remove some of the high spots, and then we'll do some rough sanding. The process of gluing on the segments is pretty straightforward. Yellow carpenter's glue, just making sure that you cover all the surfaces. You kind of really want it even a little thick. You don't want it too thin because you'd rather have more glue than not enough because later it may come apart. So with the sandpaper, when I'm grabbing it, what I'm doing is I'm rubbing it together to get some of the grit to fall into the glue. And what this does, it really helps it to bite and stay into place while it dries. This will just add more support whenever you're doing something this big. If it's off center, it could start vibrating too much. This will help just make sure that it stays in place while you get the beginning portions turned until it starts to balance out. As I was turning it, I noticed there were some larger gaps than I liked between some of the pieces. Just using some thick CA glue, basically shoved into the gap, allowed a few seconds to let it roll down, try to get it to flow inside the gap, and then hit it with some activator to help it dry fast. I went to start hogging out the middle and planned on doing another time lapse just to show some details, but I managed to hit slow motion, so enjoy the artsy look of the chips as they start flying. What I'm doing here is I'm going to take a skew and just cut a very fine straight line, 2 in the walnut and 2 in the cherry. And then what I'm going to do is come back with a piece of braided wire connected between 2 dowels. By taking that wire from underneath and sliding into the recess and then pulling up, you'll see the smoke as it actually starts to, well, the friction is creating it to make burn marks. It will really be obvious here on this cherry. just some final sanding and using higher grit sandpaper as you go along. For the finish, I'm going to use a 50-50 mixture of denatured alcohol with shellac out of a can, which comes directly from any box store. There's nothing special about it. Again, a 1-to-1 mixture, and then you'll notice that once you pour it in, you always shake it just to make sure it's all nice and mixed. And you'll also notice the foam brush that I'm pulling out of a jar that's been in that jar for several months. As long as you keep it in the jar, it's ready to use it over and over again. Now just applying the finish liberally, making sure all the surfaces are coated, and being careful not to get too many drips that may run to the bottom of the bowl that may stick to my Lazy Susan when I set it down. Nothing special with the hand sanding with the 320 grit. What I am doing that you cannot tell is that my pinky is not actually on the sandpaper, it's actually feeling the wood. So that way if there's some unusually rough spots or something, I'll feel it with my pinky, then I can go back and touch up as well. This is particularly the end grain on the cherry, which is the bottom. I needed to go back and do a couple of touch-ups now and then. And although this bowl looks great, I needed to show you one of the things that happened while making this video. Not everything goes perfect. When I was hogging out the inside, I managed to catch the tool and it gouged the bottom of the bowl. This is what it looked like after I removed those gouges and had to resand. Patience and perseverance is a good thing.